Welcome to the Virtual College Exploration for all Indiana students, sponsored by the Indiana Association for College Admission Counseling. Thank you for joining us. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenters at any time. Your camera and microphone are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. This is just one of many different sessions happening, so be sure to check out the full schedule at inacac.org. This presentation is being recorded and will be available within about a week at that same website, inacac.org. I'd now like to turn it over to our presenters.
Awesome, thank you so much. All right, it's so awesome to see so many people joining us today. My name is Nick Milheim. I am actually one of the admissions counselors at Arcadia University. We are outside of the Philadelphia area, and today I have a wonderful panel that'll be joining me to talk to everyone a little bit about test optional and kind of the world of test optional. What does it mean? What can I do if I'm applying test optional? What should I submit? That sort of stuff. So we're going to be taking you through a little bit about what applying test optional means, what it looks like at a couple of different institutions, and then a couple other vocabulary terms that you might have kind of heard in this weird virtual world that we're all kind of living in right now. So I have, like I said, I have a wonderful panel that have joined me today. I would love for them to introduce themselves now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Daryl Jones. I am a Senior Associate Director of Admission and Coordinator for Multicultural Admission and Intercollegiate Athletics Liaison at Gettysburg College, which is in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And you'll learn more in a moment, but it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Melissa Falk, and I think Daryl has a longer title than I currently do, but I'm going to give him a little run for his money. My current title is an Interim Vice President for Enrollment Management and Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid, and I'm very happy to be here with you all today.
So what we're going to do today is really lead you through the following things to help you to understand what real admission is. So although we have varying number of years to being brand new and having done it since the 90s of being test optional, what you are going to leave this session understanding is the power of having professionals read your story to link the various parts of your story and to help you to understand that if you have not had access to the ACT nor the SAT, it is not a problem. And that is certainly the case now, certainly the case next year, and even for colleges and universities that did consider testing pretty heavily in the past, they've read the assessment materials to know that the importance of testing will never equal nor exceed the importance of your academic record. Put simply, you're in school 9 months per year, whether it's virtual or in person or hybrid, testing is a day. So what we are going to do is reduce your stress level so that you understand that you are more than just a score on a page. There is the essence of you that we have the luxury to read because we work for colleges of liberal arts and sciences that pay attention to all of you. So let's tell them about our institutions. So you are now looking at an aerial view of Gettysburg College. What you see at the top of the slide is actually what borders a pretty famous part of the nation, and that is the Gettysburg National Military Park, or the battlefield. Gettysburg is a world famous town because of its historic significance, and even after the battle, that famous address delivered by Abraham Lincoln only happened because a Gettysburg College graduate invited Abraham Lincoln to stay with him overnight and deliver an address that many would argue is one of the most famous in the world. We have 2,600 students. We have 6,500 plus majors. And what we're about is this: access, opportunity, and integration. I'll explain what that means. With access, it means that many of the things that would normally cost people a lot of money to do we make happen. Under normal circumstances, we would say that Washington, D.C., which is an hour and 20 minutes away, and certainly Baltimore, Maryland, which is 50 minutes, Philadelphia, 2 hours, New York City, 3.5 to 4 hours. We are taking advantage of those cities for great cultural opportunities, certainly for wonderful educational opportunities, and also for wonderful career-related things. One of the things I will tell you about the three institutions, we have great things happening on campus, and we have great outcomes after you leave. In fact, 98% of our graduates within about a year of graduation are within 6 months lately, really, but they are in a career path they want to be in or further schooling of their choice. Career path, not just a job, but something they want to be doing. Another part of access is this. The three institutions believe strongly that it's not just liberal arts, humanities, it is liberal arts and sciences, which means the research opportunities that you would expect, the things you'd want to do as a biochemist, a health scientist, an environmental scientist, someone who's going into pre-vet, pre-med. We make those opportunities available. And in Gettysburg's case, if we can't make it happen right here, we'll partner with places like Johns Hopkins for a direct admit for nursing and things of that sort. Another part of that, which covers all three, is this. We are one of the few institutions in the nation that actually makes 2 semesters of off-campus study a zero-cost differential. All the credits transfer back to Gettysburg. All of the money that you might get in the way of merit-based scholarships or need-based aid travels with you, and we pay the round-trip airfare. So we're not about short-time experiences, it's long time. Our athletes are doing it, our scientists are doing it, and we expect you to do it. One piece about science is, again, we expect you to do research. It's not a special privilege, we expect it. So even in the first year, you are going to get your housing paid for, you are going to get paid, and you're going to do research directly with a faculty member. So with us, it is about balance. Yes, we have great athletics, as do all of these schools. In fact, our women's lacrosse team has 3 national championships in the past 9 years. As far as football is concerned, we have to give the conference nod to Muhlenberg, which is the powerhouse, but we are in a great conference, the Centennial Conference, that is great academically and great athletically. One piece that separates Gettysburg College is this. We have a conservatory, and more than half of the people who are musicians on campus are not majoring in one of the great programs, they are just good at it. Regarding admission, we've been test optional since 2007, and what we did is we watched places that went before us, Muhlenberg, and certainly well before that, which one of my colleagues will describe, Bowdoin College and several others, who did it right, proved that it could be successful, proved that it was correct, and so we followed. We followed. So we're happy to be with you today talking about this very important topic regarding taking the stress off of you and testing. Take it away,
Daryl.
Sure.
I appreciate the nod for football. Obviously, I'm not directly, you cannot attribute that to my talent specifically, but happy to share with our guests today a little bit more about Muhlenberg. And just like Daryl had described, you know, a liberal arts and sciences curriculum in terms of the opportunity to study across different disciplines, but also a history of really strong pre-professional placement, whether it's in med school or law school or professional programs in accounting. Muhlenberg actually has a full accounting, business, and economics program specifically, and our accounting students have the job placement that is the envy of all of campus, in that our students, when they arrive in the fall of their senior year, already have a contract signed, typically with a Big 4 accounting firm, after having spent their junior year internship summer with them. But we're in Allentown, third largest city in Pennsylvania, about 120,000 people. We are very nicely located. I say nestled in between Philadelphia and New York City. And so those great access points for our students in terms of major metropolitan areas, but certainly locally in terms of the small city that surrounds us as a diverse city that provides opportunities for internship and culture and experience on a small city scale, but still a very residential college like the other places represented on this panel, both Gettysburg and Arcadia as well. 38 academic majors, 35 minors, about 30% of our students double major, which is very common. And a lot of that is attributed to the fact that we attract students who very particularly are cross-discipline interested, as well as the fact that our curriculum and our faculty are similarly cross-discipline interested. Small environment in which you are going to be a student who will be a known entity in the class, on the fields, on the stage, in the studios. People are going to know and care about who you are. And as Daryl mentioned, we are part of the Great Centennial Athletic Conference, a conference of athletic scholar athletes, if you will. And so that to know that you're really competing at a high level, both academically and athletically, is something that we're particularly proud of. And we're also proud of the fact that last fall in 2019, Muhlenberg did make it as, thank you, Daryl, for the nod. Muhlenberg's football team did make it to the Final Four national championships, which was really a great boon and a great experience. You would have thought 20,000 people went to Muhlenberg that Saturday in December that we hosted that game, which was terrific. Very busy environment, 130 student clubs and organizations, and we have great food here. So we've been ranked in the top 20 nationally in terms of best college food. I'm partial to our cookies in the bakery, but there are lots of other great things that people enjoy as well. And we have been test optional since 1996, so not as long as Bowdoin, but certainly we're going into our 25th year of reading applications. And specifically offering test optional as an opportunity for applicants, as they have the agency then to decide the ways in which they can showcase their talents and their potential through their application materials with or without those test scores specifically. Nick, you're up.
Awesome, thank you so much. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Arcadia University. And as you can see from this first slide here, we do have a wonderful castle on campus. Arcadia University, where we are today, actually used to be a private residence. So the castle used to be for a family of four. I'm sure they weren't really happy in that castle, but it is such an amazing kind of focal point of campus. You always know where you are. You can always see the castle when you're on campus, and it really never gets old. So that's just one of the really cool things about Arcadia. And there are dorms in the castle, so you could live in the castle your first year, which is pretty amazing. I guarantee you'll probably beat all of your other friends if you live in a castle your first year. So if you go to the next slide for me, Melissa. Arcadia University, we are located in Glenside, Pennsylvania. So we are a part of the greater Philadelphia area, in this little corner of Pennsylvania, in the southeast corner of Pennsylvania. So in Glenside itself is a nice little town, has lots of shops and restaurants and, Target, Walmart, everything that a college student needs right in the area of Glenside that we're in. But what's really amazing about Glenside is that we're only about 25 minutes from Center City, Philadelphia. So you have Philadelphia really at your disposal, while also enjoying, the nice green spaces that we have on campus, the castle, and, kind of the flexibility of being on a suburban campus. We're about 2,100 undergraduate students, about 1,400 graduate students at Arcadia, more than 65 fields of study that we offer. Not only 65, undergraduate programs, but we have also a lot of award-winning graduate programs as well. We are so proud that we actually have our Doctorate of Physical Therapy program that's ranked 24th in the nation. We also have a top 100 program for our physician's assistant program as well. So those are some of the many programs that we're really proud of at Arcadia. In addition, we are Division III athletics, like my colleagues here on campus or on this panel. However, we are part of the Mid-Atlantic Conference for athletics for Arcadia. And it really wouldn't be Arcadia if we didn't talk about the global perspective that we really emphasize here on campus. So Arcadia is really in a unique position that studying abroad and global opportunities are really in our DNA. Ever since we were founded as Beaver College back in the late 1800s, studying abroad has really been something that has been uniquely and, specifically Arcadia in our region. So we are ranked number 2 in the nation for our study abroad participation. We do offer long-term programs in addition to short-term programs. You can actually do an internship abroad if you want to do an internship abroad. So there are so many different opportunities and ways to go abroad at Arcadia. And we really do emphasize every major to go abroad, like many of my colleagues said. It's not something that is limited to certain majors. Like Daryl said, our athletes are going, our scientists are going, education majors are going, for a program that sometimes is really strict. There are opportunities to go abroad when it comes to Arcadia. So we're really happy and proud that we have so many different opportunities, at our disposal with that. And even on the Glenside campus, you're going to get that uniquely global perspective in everything that you do. So not only is there are a lot of opportunity to go abroad, and we really encourage our students to go abroad, but by no means is it required. It's not something that you have to do while you're at Arcadia. You're really going to get that emphasis while you're on campus as well. So that's a little bit about Arcadia. And we're actually the newest of the panel here to move to test optional. So we actually just adopted our test optional policy for 2020 here. So we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of that later on, but that's a little bit about Arcadia. So test optional is by no means anything that's new in this world of kind of COVID-19 and virtual reality and that sort of stuff. So while we've seen a lot more colleges kind of move to this test optional policy as this year kind of developed and everything kind of started happening, it's not something that is new just this year. It might have not been something that you've heard before, but as we've talked a little bit about today, Bowdoin College was actually the first one to start exploring test optional and eventually adopted the policy in 1969. So by no means is this something that's new for a lot of us, in the world of higher education.
I think the other piece too is, even though, Bowdoin started ages ago and a number of colleges since, is to even talk about, why do colleges even consider test optional, right? And really, the questions of access and questions about how do you ensure that talented students continue to consider joining your academic communities and your college campuses is a real question. Bowdoin obviously came to their answer a lot quicker than a lot of other places specifically, but really recognizing that in terms of standardized testing, its history really reflects that there are certain student populations that just simply don't test as well. And it was not reflective specifically of their talent, their potential, their ability to succeed on the college level. And so what you're going to find is even just the genesis of these programs at so many institutions, probably virtually all the places that actually are test optional or have a test flexible or test blind option, really comes from this place of asking the question of how do we make sure as many academically talented students and really interesting people, have access to the kind of educational experience we offer in our academic communities specifically.
And the odd conundrum is this: people so often look to be attracted to a place based on how high an SAT average is. Oh, that must be a great school. Look at that ACT average. But that's not really why you attend a college. In fact, for the three of us, for Arcadia, Muhlenberg, and Gettysburg, people are attracted to us and to Bowdoin and so many other places because they are interesting, exciting places full of opportunity. So when we are doing admissions, here's what I know. Again, school is 180 days, so your attitude, your diligence, your effort, your ability to complete assignments on time, your ability to think, speak, write, critically analyze, that is measured by the rigor of your courses based on what's available to you and how well you do on those. So to put it simply, if I'm given the choice to drive beside a teenager who might have done well on a standardized exam called the driver's license exam, versus someone whose daily habits behind the wheel are excellent, I'm going to choose the person whose daily habits are excellent. Who you are comes from more than just your academics, even, because many schools, at least of our sort, at least one teacher recommendation, one high school recommendation, an essay, perhaps an interview, perhaps looking at your activities to see, even though I know that you've been disrupted, as has the world, to see where your commitments lie, whether those are school-related things, a job, babysitting, a personal hobby. So the essence of who you are will never be measured purely by a standardized test. Remember, and I'll say it again, you're more than what your scores are, and certainly our institutions writ large are greater than just a set of SAT scores. Be somewhere where opportunity exists. Be somewhere that your effort is rewarded with an acceptance.
I also wanted to add one more thing that, a lot of us have kind of realized that more and more schools have moved to a test optional policy this year. So, I feel like that's what we kind of see first because it's immediately in our minds and that sort of thing. So I also just wanted to talk a little bit about how moving and adopting to a test optional policy does not take anything away from the institutions that adopt it at all. It's not that they're trying to make it easier to get into. It's not like that sort of stuff. It's about access and equity and inclusion, like Daryl and Melissa talked a little bit about already. So at least for Arcadia's side, and as we said on the slide here too, colleges this year, with this huge change that happened in the world, looked at their admissions processes, identified that there was something that might be keeping people away from their colleges, and they wanted to fix that. So in Arcadia's case, our huge commitments to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, we sat down and looked at ourselves and said, hey, you know what, there's something that we got to fix here. And I think that that's really important as an institution, and does not show weakness, does not show anything else. You identified a problem and we aimed to remedy it. So I think that that's a really important thing to kind of keep in mind when you're seeing test optional, is that, doesn't mean this doesn't take anything away from the school. We still have all of the opportunities that we talked a little bit about in the beginning, of the slide, and nothing changed in the year that we adopted test optional in terms of that stuff. Also, just to kind of go through and give everyone a little bit of a sense of what some of these key terms mean. So we're throwing around test optional, but test optional is really a blanket term to describe an institutional policy. So, and it focuses around, not requiring standardized exams or a specific exam in general. So in practice, that test optional really refers to an institution that gives the students a choice on if they want to submit their scores or if they don't. So if you have scores, all three of us institutions, are going to accept those if, you want. So you don't have to do that, at least in Arcadia's sense. I shouldn't speak for everybody, but in Arcadia's sense, you don't have to submit your scores if you don't want to, but you can if you have taken them. Test flexible refers to an institution that gives students a choice on if they want to submit their scores for the SAT or ACT. There's no preference in that regard which one you would be taking. And then test blind refers to institutions that will not consider test scores even if you have them. So even if you submit them to them, they're not going to look at them. It's not going to be part of their holistic review process, and that sort of thing. So, when we kind of throw around test optional, it could mean a couple different things, but that's a little bit of background of kind of what that lingo refers to.
I think the other thing I'd like to throw out too, just as a resource for you all, and it's ever evolving. I don't know that it's evolving as rapidly as it was over the last 6 months, but I would highly recommend referring to, if you have questions about test optional policies or test flexible policies, I would refer to fairtestorg. It's a great resource. It keeps a cumulative list of colleges and universities that either have test optional, test flexible, or test blind policies. And they have very specific information as it relates to, is the policy, has it been in motion for many, many years? Is it just for the next 3 years? Is it just for the fall 21 application cycle? It's a great resource to take a look at. You're going to see, if you look at it today, there are well over 1,500 schools of the almost 2,400 four-year baccalaureate granting colleges and universities across the country. So well over half of the colleges and universities in the US have some sort of test flexible, optional, or blind policy. In addition to which, you're going to recognize a lot of names on that list. All of the Ivy League schools are on that list. The whole UC system, places that you've heard of, major flagship state universities. You're going to see names that everybody has heard of in terms of the college process, and there are going to be names on there that you haven't heard of. But one of the things that I encourage is, because institutions have made this commitment, just because you haven't heard of a place, I think being on that list signifies that the ways in which those schools are recognizing issues of access as it relates to testing. And clearly this year, particularly because of the limitations of actually taking a test period for you all, I know that everybody's sort of rushing to whatever registration they can find. One of the conversations we had previously is that people were driving across state lines to get a test. Don't do it. You know, don't spend that time driving hours on, or stressing yourself out about registering for a testing date specifically that ultimately might get canceled, and it may be out of your hands because of whatever the health and safety issues may be of that day. And I think, Daryl, you had a great comment last time in terms of how it is that you'd recommend students use their time, you know, rather than driving across state lines to get an exam. The reference was, you know, use that to do something else, whether it's contribute to your community, you know, read more of that book you've been assigned in English, take a little more time to, you know, kind of write that essay, or really, or just be involved in your senior year and engaged in your communities in ways that not only benefit you, but benefit others that you are connecting with. And so recognizing all of that is something that I think is really important to understand how extensive the options are for you. For seniors particularly, and it will continue then through this year for many places, but there are many colleges and universities that are recognizing that the whole of who you are and what you contribute to a college community is not summed up in a test score by any stretch.
Actual stories that I've heard from people in Indiana, Eastern Indiana. They've registered for a test. They've driven to suburban Chicago, so they've gone across Indiana and up Lake Michigan. But they found out on the very day that the school administering the test decided this is just for our own. So sorry, but you can't come in here. So you've driven all the way across Indiana, and then you've had to go back. That's tolls, that's fuel, that's time, that's stress, and that's something you don't need. What we want you to understand is how, again, we look at this whole issue. We're not grade optional. We're test optional, test blind, or test flexible. So that means if you do happen to submit your testing and it's really high, but you're getting straight F's in the classroom, which I hope you're not getting, well, you've done a great job for several hours, but you've done a poor job for several years. So yeah, Melissa, Nick, I'm a fan of saying, look, read a book, write a paper. And yes, I just held up a pen, write a paper. Spend some time outside, get off your phone. Be someone who does what we know what it takes to be successful. That is, you manage your time, you handle stress, you advance your interpersonal skill development. Yes, it has to be done from a safer distance, but when Melissa mentions doing something to be engaged in the community, remember that at some point, several years from now, you will actually be interviewing for careers or graduate school or med school or law school. It takes interpersonal skill development to do that. So, because all of us have heard of so many situations in which people have driven to take these tests thinking it would enhance their opportunities, we just want you to stop. We want you to stop. And we want you to trust just a couple of different parties when it comes to this whole idea of whether or not we mean it when we are test optional. One is your high school counselor. You might have heard from a neighbor or two, well, I know that admissions said that, but really you should submit them anyway. Well, your neighbor might have had 3 or 4 or 5 children go through college, times how many ever applications, but your counselors are dealing with hundreds and hundreds of applications per year, so they are experts. The other people are admissions people. So you can make yourself stand out by using this device for a crazy purpose that not many people use it for. You knew this was coming, Melissa. You can actually call us and ask us, how do you do admissions? What really matters? If I don't submit testing, what is the penalty if there is one? We're going to tell you there isn't one. So focus on the things that really matter about you, because as you'll hear from whichever one of my colleagues wants to take it, admission with us is a human process. The term holistic is used often, but it's human.
I think the global experience in terms of the pandemic, and even just the national experience of the unrest in the country of late, is just, I think what it does is it really gets you to reflect on what really matters, and making sure that your work and how we work with students, I think as admissions professionals, it sort of gets us back to our core and to our soul and to our missions in lots of ways. And so hopefully, even just in terms of the very informal conversation we've had with you all today, you understand that we're real people. Admissions counselors are legitimately real people reading your applications. And we're bringing our real peopleness, if you will, to that review process, recognizing the context in which you're living, the context in which you're learning, the context in which you're surviving and thriving, whatever the characterization is of the day, because that can fluctuate, right? But we recognize that, and we'll be reading about you and your educational experiences and your connections to your community, and about what you dream of and aspire to through that lens. And I want to reassure you that that's the case, certainly this year. But really, that's how, and I can say this very confidently in terms of my colleagues, that that's how we've always done admissions. But I think it just brings us back to our souls in a lot of ways, reflecting on events of this last year and even of late, right?
And just to piggyback off of that, Melissa, like, we wouldn't know this stuff otherwise unless you tell us. I mean, with a test score, we don't know like where you were taking it. What if the fire alarm was beeping because the batteries were low in the background the whole time? Or, you had a bunch of stuff, like you had a crazy car ride over there. Like, it really doesn't tell us anything about you, and we want to know about you. So I think that, my colleague said it really well with the holistic review process, is that it is a human connection. And like, I want to know about all the things that you've been doing. I'm reading it because I want to, sort of thing. So I really, want to emphasize that too.
So Melissa, if you could briefly talk specifically a little bit more, just a couple of minutes on, all right, you're opening a file at Muhlenberg. What's the order in which you see things on an application, and what really gets your attention?
So it's interesting. So there is an order that the application, you flip through the files of the common application and that's the way you would apply to Muhlenberg. But the first place I go, because I can filter to begin with, I actually go to your essay. I go to your essay because I talk about this with students, that it's your only chance to have the undivided attention of a college admissions counselor at a very, very sort of busy time. But it's this very sort of, it's a personal experience in that it's just you, your essay, and that person. And oftentimes in the reading process, you all should know, it's a very social and very interactive profession. We're sitting alone in whatever residence we might be in at that point in time. Oftentimes, actually, it feels a lot like working in quarantine this past spring. I was sort of joking, I'm like, we're often in our pajamas. I guess that's not entirely different than in terms of what we've been living through right now. But I go to the essay first, Daryl. I want to try to get a sense of the student's voice. I want to see what they write. What do they care enough to write about? What's going to be reflected about who they are, that will sew together all the other pieces that I hear from their teachers and their transcript and their resume. But most importantly, what do I hear from them directly?
Thank you for that, Melissa. Same for you, Nick. What things actually get your attention at Arcadia?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say the essay as well, but for me, I also really love seeing your involvement. On the Common App, there's a little section that has, what type of activities you're doing in your school, in your community, whatever else you're doing that. I like to go there as well. I also like to look at the essay, and then most of the time I go right to the transcript after that. Mostly because I think that when I'm reviewing, the transcript also tells me a little bit of a story. It tells me about your development in high school and, that sort of thing. And I can see maybe where your areas of interest are and, see if they're, correlating to what you want to pursue at Arcadia and see if that story kind of connects in all of those different ways. So that's a little bit about my process. But I would love to hear Daryl's too.
Yeah, we're pretty much the same. We're going to go to the things that separate you by authenticity. I can look at a transcript in about a minute and know who you are based on the school you attend. I can look at any other thing quickly, but it's the recommendation tied to the interview notes, tied to your essay, tied to your resume. That's what grabs us. I do know that we do have a great question here in the chat, basically dealing with a student who's registered to take a test actually later in this month. And, there is a certain number of schools to which the scores can be sent for free. So the question is, should we remove those schools from receiving the free test? How would you handle it as a parent if you needed to know whether or not it was worth sending your scores and where you might send them? So Melissa or Nick, what do you think?
I'm thinking in a very myopic sense because we take self-reported scores at Muhlenberg. So I thought, if you're applying to Muhlenberg, don't even use one of your free schools to send to on Muhlenberg because we'll take the self-reported ones. And Daryl's shaking his head like they do that at Gettysburg as well. I think it sounds like the concern might be if the school is test optional potentially, and or let's assume that the school is test optional because most are this upcoming year. Sending the scores, if a student elects to be test optional, ultimately should not be part of the application review process then if the student selects that. So there should be no disadvantage in sending them. The advantage is if you do decide to send them and the student decides to submit their scores, they're already there. And for example, if the college or university requires them to be officially sent in order to consider them, you didn't have to pay for them. So I don't see the harm in sending it if you're sending to a school that offers the test optional policy, because if in fact that your student elects not to be test optional, then that school should not be reviewing those test scores regardless, whether or not they exist in the file, if you will. I don't know if anybody has a different opinion on that.
No, I would absolutely agree. And I would say that just one other kind of alternative comment is that at least in the case of Arcadia, we're rolling admissions. So for us, if you're not sure about your score yet, you could always wait to send them later for us, apply test optional, and then send them to us later. So, your scholarship is never going to go down. We would never hurt you for a score if it's not where you want it to be, if you do send it to us. But we would consider them if it would go up in any way. So if it warrants any change to a merit scholarship or anything like that, at least in Arcadia's sense, we would do that. I also just kind of going off of that is, this depending on the 4 schools that you choose, I would just look at what type of review process that they have. If they are rolling admissions, then I would say, wait until you have the scores. And then if you're not sure, send them later. But if you have some deadlines, I think that will be a factor for sure. But that's just kind of like my kind of thought process when hearing that question.
It requires, again, some old school. Pick up the phone and actually call the offices, because even though all 3 of us are colleges of liberal arts and sciences, and there are hundreds of those across the nation, each place might have a different priority depending on even the time of year that it is. So as an example, if I were a parent, I would first have my child look up what the middle 50% of the testing is to see if it's going to be worth it. Because it is, as my colleague said, after the fact, if your scores sit in a pretty nice place that is toward the top of their distribution or solidly in the upper half of the distribution, then you may want to send them. But if your scores are below that, why give an institution anything that shows a potential weakness? So that's first. The second thing to find out is, will merit be affected by me not sending testing? So you can do that over the phone. And the third, as has been mentioned, is you can ask us what our priorities are, and we'll tell you. Do not trust anyone else. If you want to know the testing policies regarding anything, or you want to know how you're going to be read, Arcadia, Gettysburg, Muhlenberg, just call us, because actual people will tell you exactly how we view things. So if you're looking at any school that is test optional, please understand that we actually are that. Again, school is year by year. So make sure that the places you're even thinking of sending those free scores are worth sending them, because those places may not care at all. Remember, when we talked about one of the terms being test blind, even if you send them, those are deleted from your records. So call places, see if it's worth it, and then proceed accordingly. But thank you for that question.
I think we've been incredibly informative today, it looks like. Although I think one of the things to bring up that Daryl referenced is the fact that, so these varied policies, varied admissions policies, while colleges will offer them, there may be some different requirements attached to them that are different, right? And that fairtestorg website will also offer this information, but like Daryl said, go to the source. So for example, at some colleges and universities, test optional may mean they are test optional, but perhaps they want an additional writing sample. Perhaps they require that you interview. As Daryl mentioned, it could also be that any of these sort of text flexible, optional, or blind policies may mean that maybe preclude students from merit scholarship consideration, or it may not. And those are things that I can't agree enough with what Daryl said, and maybe he and I are old school in that regard. But you know, pick up the phone and talk to a real person. We're actually offering you that opportunity because, number one, we want to see you as that real person and that whole person. But similarly, that's how we, that's how we'd interact with you as a member of our community as well. And so making sure that, are there some additional steps or details of the policy that you want to make sure you're aware of? Because if you do want to take advantage of it in terms of being a test optional or test flexible or test blind applicant, if you will, you want to make sure that you fulfill everything that you need to, specifically, because you could apply and not even realize, oh my gosh, they were waiting for an additional writing sample, or I didn't realize an interview was required. And so unfortunately, then your application could sit incomplete somewhere where we're not able to make a decision because we don't have all the complete materials. So that's probably a good piece of advice, regardless if you're applying test optional or not, just to make sure that you you do your due diligence in terms of making sure that you know what is expected of you in terms of materials to be submitted in order for your application to actually be reviewed so that you can get an admissions decision.
And you want to talk about the perfect way to end it, Melissa, that is how you do it. So let's have our colleague from Indiana ACAC come back on, and we have a few housekeeping items for all of you to deal with. But thank you all for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Lots of luck.
Thanks to the presenters. I'm going to put up that final screen of housekeeping announcements real quick, and we'll go over that. Again, thank you for joining us. When you close this window, there will be a link to a very quick 4-question survey. We'd appreciate any feedback that you can provide as a participant. Also, this was just one of many sessions being hosted, so be sure to sign up for additional sessions at InACAC.org. In about a week, you will be able to find this session's recording, as well as all of the other session recordings at InACAC.org. Thank you.